Hey guys, tonight we are going somewhere very far away and very long ago. You are settling into a comfortable place now, your body heavy, your breathing slow, and I want you to let the world around you soften at the edges, the room you are in right now, the ceiling above you, the weight of the blanket, or the sheet across your legs. All of it is fading just a little. You are drifting back through centuries and dynasties, past centuries of noise and hurry, past the great machines and the bright screens, past the very concept of urgency itself. You are stepping into a world where time moved at the speed of water, heating over a charcoal brazier, where patience was not a virtue, but a necessity, where the most important thing you could do at any given moment was watch steam curl upward from a small ceramic bowl and try to read the weather in it. You stand at the foot of a mountain, and the mountain is covered in green. Not the flat green of a lawn or the sharp green of a city park, but a living green that shifts and crests as you watch. The mist clings to the slopes in ribbons and patches, and when it moves, you catch glimpses of terraced hillsides carved into the stone by hands that understood the mountain better than they understood their own names. The tea bushes grow in rows that follow the natural curves of the land, each plant pruned to waist height, each leaf shaped by centuries of careful selection. The air here tastes different. You breathe it in, and it is cool and damp, and carries the faint metallic tang of distant waterfalls. You can smell the wet earth beneath your feet, the decaying leaves that mulch the roots of the tea plants, the faint sweetness of wildflowers growing in the gaps between terraces. You bend down and touch one of the leaves. It is firm and slightly waxy, and when you rub it between your fingers, it releases a green, vegetal scent that is unmistakably alive. The morning is just beginning to break over the ridgeline. You can feel the light cresting, not because you see it directly through the mist, but because the temperature shifts almost imperceptibly on your skin. The cold dampness lifts just a fraction, and the air takes on a golden warmth that you feel on the back of your neck. You hear birds in the canopy above you, small sharp calls that bounce off the stone walls of the terraces and come back to you from 3 different directions at once. Somewhere down the slope, water trickles through a bamboo channel, and the sound is so constant and so quiet that your ears register it only when you stop listening for anything else. You walk along the narrow path between the tea rows. The ground under your feet is uneven, packed earth worn smooth by generations of feet that carried baskets full of leaves up and down these same terraces. You notice the small things as you walk. A spider web strung between 2 branches, beaded with moisture that catches the light in tiny rainbows. A snail shell wedged into a crack in the stone, its spiral perfect and unbroken. A patch of moss growing on the north side of a tea bush, so green and so soft-looking that you reach out and touch it. It is cool and springy, like pressing your finger into the memory foam of a mattress 800 years before memory foam exists. you meet a tea picker on the path. She is a woman with weathered hands and a bamboo basket strapped to her back, and she moves with an economy of motion that tells you she has been doing this since before she could read. She nods to you, a small gesture that is neither warm nor cold, simply present, and continues walking. You watch her stop at a tea bush and begin to work. Her right hand moves in a rhythm that is almost musical. Thumb and forefinger find a young shoot, snap it clean at the base, and deposit it into the basket slung over her shoulder. Another shoot, another. The motion is so practiced that it looks effortless, but you know that the skill involved is enormous. She is selecting only the youngest leaves and the tightest buds, the ones that will produce the finest tea, and she is doing it at a pace that seems casual, but is actually relentless. You watch for a while, and your own shoulders begin to ache just from the sympathy of observation. You crouch down beside one of the bushes and examine it closely. The new growth is a different color from the mature leaves, a lighter, almost translucent green that looks like it might bruise if you looked at it too hard. The buds are still furled tight, like tiny green fists, and you can see a fine down covering them, almost invisible unless the light catches it just right. This down, this tiny forest of microscopic hairs, is one of the secrets of good tea. It protects the young leaf from too much sun and too much rain, and it will later become part of what gives the finest teas their characteristic softness, their texture that is somewhere between silk and velvet on your tongue. You lean in close and smell the bud. It smells like rain and green things and something else, something harder to name, a suggestion of the mountain itself, trapped inside a leaf, no bigger than your thumbnail. The picker finishes the row she is working on and shifts her basket to the other shoulder. The basket is woven from split bamboo, and you can see the dark stains of tea juice on the inside, the residue of thousands of previous harvests. She moves to the next bush and begins again. You follow her with your eyes, not because you are supervising, but because there is something hypnotic about the rhythm of her work, the snap of the leaf, the pause, the shift of weight, the reach for the next shoot. It is a dance that has been performed on these slopes for more years than anyone alive can count, and the dance has shaped not just the tea, but the landscape itself. Every terrace, every stone wall, every bamboo irrigation channel exists because someone decided centuries ago that this particular mountain was worth climbing. This particular soil was worth working. This particular microclimate was worth studying with the kind of attention that only comes from generations of trial and error. You leave the picker to her work and continue walking. The path rises now, climbing more steeply into the upper terraces. Your breathing deepens, not from exertion, but from the altitude and the richness of the air. At this elevation, the mist is thinner, and you can see further. The valley below you is a bowl of green shadow, and the peaks around you are like islands rising from a sea of cloud. You find a flat stone at the edge of a terrace and sit down. The stone is warm from the sun that has finally broken through the mist, and you rest your hands on its surface and feel the heat seep into your palms. From here, you can see the whole plantation spread out below you, and you understand something that you could not have understood from the ground. The tea bushes are not arranged randomly. They follow patterns that are both natural and deliberate, shaped by the contours of the land and by the accumulated knowledge of people who understood that the best tea comes from plants that are stressed just enough to concentrate their flavors, but not so much that they suffer. The ones growing on the steeper slopes, where the drainage is better and the roots have to work harder to find nutrients, will produce teas that are more complex and more aromatic. The ones in the sheltered hollows, where the air stays still and warm, will produce teas that are softer and sweeter. You can read the landscape like a recipe. If you know how to look, you sit on the warm stone for a while, and the world grows quiet around you. The birds have settled into a slower rhythm, the calls coming less frequently now that the morning urgency has passed. The water in the bamboo channel continues its endless trickle. The mist rises and falls like the breathing of something enormous and sleeping. You close your eyes, and when you open them again, the scene has crested. You are no longer on the mountain. You are in a courtyard, and the year is very far from the one you started in. You are in the 8th century, and you are sitting in a courtyard in Creston. The city is vast, the largest city in the world at this moment, and you can feel its energy even from this quiet corner. The courtyard is paved with flagstones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and around it runs a covered walkway supported by wooden columns painted a deep, fading red. In the center of the courtyard, a small fire burns in a bronze brazier, and above the fire sits a kettle. The kettle is iron, blackened by soot, and it is humming. You know that sound. The water inside is approaching the first boil, and the kettle is warning you. The surface of the water is beginning to move, and small bubbles are forming at the edges, rising and breaking with tiny pops that you can hear if you lean forward. The steam rising from the kettle is thin and almost invisible, but it carries a scent that is mineral and clean, the smell of water that has been heated just enough to release its trapped air. A man is sitting across from you. He is older, his hair tied back in a simple topknot, his robes the color of unbleached linen. He is not a nobleman and not a scholar, or rather he is both and neither. The way that expertise tends to erase the boundaries between social categories when you are the only person in a room who knows what you are doing. He holds a small wooden paddle in his hand, and he is using it to stir the leaves that sit in a shallow bowl beside the brazier. The leaves are compressed into a cake, as was the custom in this era. Tea is pressed, dried, and stored in solid form, and when you want to drink it, you break off a piece, crush it into powder, and add it to the water. The man taps the paddle against the edge of the bowl, and the sound is sharp and precise in the still air. He is measuring the amount of powder by eye and by instinct, and you can see that his eye is very good and his instinct is better. He looks up at you and speaks, and though you cannot understand the words, you understand the gesture. He is telling you to watch. He lifts the kettle from the brazier and pours a small amount of the hot water over the tea powder in a separate vessel, just enough to wet it and release its aroma. The scent hits you immediately. It is earthy and astringent, with a sweetness underneath that reminds you of roasted nuts and dried fruit. He stirs the paste he has created with the tip of his paddle, and the motion is deliberate, almost meditative. This is not cooking, you realize. This is performance. This is an act that has meaning beyond the beverage it produces, and the meaning is contained in the movements themselves, in the care taken, in the attention given to each step. The kettle hums again, louder this time. The second boil. The bubbles are larger now, rising from the bottom of the kettle in a steady stream, and the steam is thicker. He lifts the kettle again and pours the water into the vessel containing the tea paste. The sound is a rushing hiss, and the mixture foams up immediately, a pale green froth rising to the surface. He watches it carefully, and when the foam reaches the rim, he lifts the vessel and pours the tea into small bowls. The liquid is an unexpected color. You expected green, perhaps, or brown, but it is something in between, a pale jade that catches the light and holds it. The foam on top is white and fine, like the head on a freshly poured beer, and it has tiny patterns in it, swirls and eddies that form and dissolve as the surface settles. He pushes one of the bowls toward you. You take it in both hands. The ceramic is warm against your palms, and the weight of it feels substantial, grounding. You bring the bowl to your lips and breathe in the steam before you drink. The aroma is complex. There is the vegetal greenness you noticed earlier, but now there are other notes layered on top of it, a hint of smoke from the charcoal fire, a mineral quality that you associate with mountain streams, a faint sweetness that is almost floral, but not quite, something closer to the scent of fresh-cut grass after rain. You take a sip. The taste is sharp at first, almost bitter, and you feel it on the sides of your tongue where bitterness lives. But then the bitterness softens, and a sweetness emerges from the middle of the palate, and the aftertaste is something you have never experienced in a drink before. It lingers. It is not the cloying sweetness of sugar, but something cleaner, more like the taste of air after a thunderstorm. You swallow, and you feel the tea travel down your throat and into your stomach, and there is warmth there, a spreading warmth that has nothing to do with temperature, and everything to do with the way the tea is interacting with your body. You sit back and breathe out slowly, and the man across from you nods. He knows what you are feeling. He has been feeling it himself for decades. You are sitting in a tea house in the Song Dynasty, several centuries after the Courtyard in Creston, and the world has crested. Tea is no longer the compressed cake that you crush and boil. The method has evolved, and the evolution is written in the objects around you. The kettle is gone. In its place is a large ceramic bowl, and beside it sits a whisk made of split bamboo, the tines fine and flexible, and a small container holding tea that has been ground to a powder so fine that it feels like talc between your fingers. This is the whipped tea of the Song period, and it is a different creature entirely from the boiled tea of the Tang. The process is simpler in some ways and more demanding in others. You add hot water to the bowl, not boiling, but just off the boil, and then you add the tea powder. The powder hits the water and sinks, and for a moment it looks like nothing will happen. Then you pick up the bamboo whisk and begin to move it back and forth rapidly, in short, sharp strokes. The sound is distinctive, a soft, rapid clicking, like rain on a thatched roof, and the sound tells you everything you need to know about the quality of the whisk and the skill of the person holding it. You feel the resistance of the water against the whisk, and gradually the tea begins to dissolve and aerate. The liquid thickens and foam begins to form. Not the thin foam of the Tang method, but a thick, creamy froth that rises and holds its shape. You keep whisking. Your wrist aches slightly, but the ache is pleasant, the way that any physical effort feels good when it is applied to something that matters. The foam builds and builds, and you watch it with the kind of attention that people usually reserve for watching fire or water. The surface of the foam is a landscape in miniature, with peaks and valleys and tiny channels where the liquid tea is still visible. You stop whisking and set the whisk down. The foam holds. It is white and dense, and it sits on top of the green liquid like snow on a hillside. You lift the bowl and drink from the edge, not from the center, because the foam is meant to be consumed first. The texture is extraordinary. It is thick and velvety, and it coats your mouth in a way that makes you want to keep your lips closed and let the sensation linger. The taste is intense. The grinding process has concentrated the flavors, and every note is amplified. The grassy greenness is still there, but it is richer now, deeper, with undertones of seaweed and fresh spinach, and something almost savory, like the taste of a good broth. You swallow, and the aftertaste is long and clean, leaving your mouth feeling refreshed in a way that has nothing to do with temperature. The tea house around you is full of people, but it is not loud. This is not a place for raucous conversation or for drinking to get drunk. It is a place for sitting and watching and thinking, for the kind of social interaction that happens at a low volume and a slow pace. You look around. There are scholars at a corner table, their hair pinned up and their robes immaculate, discussing a poem in voices so soft that you can hear only the rhythm of their speech, not the words. There is a merchant at the counter, counting coins with one hand while holding a bowl of tea in the other. His face, a mask of concentration that is almost identical to the concentration you saw on the face of the tea picker on the mountain. There is a young woman by the window, writing something on a piece of paper with a brush, her expression distant and absorbed. The tea house is a microcosm of the city, and the tea is the thread that connects everyone in it. You think about Lu Yu. Everyone who drinks tea in this era thinks about Lu Yu, whether they have read his classic of tea or not, because his book has shaped the culture so completely that its influence is invisible, like the foundation of a building that you only notice when it starts to crack. Lu Yu was an orphan, raised by monks in a monastery, and he learned about tea by watching the monks brew it during their long hours of meditation. He grew up to become the first person in history to write seriously about tea, not as medicine or as a commodity, but as an art form. And his book, written in the 8th century, is still the most important text on the subject ever produced. You have read it, or at least you have heard it read aloud, because the book is so widely known that even people who cannot read know its contents through oral transmission. You remember passages that have stayed with you. Lu Yu's description of the 9 stages of water temperature, each with its own name and its own effect on the tea. His instructions for the proper shape of the tea bowl, which should be round and deep, and should cradle the liquid without spilling it. His insistence that the quality of the water matters as much as the quality of the leaves, and that mountain spring water is superior to river water, which is superior to well water, and that rainwater collected during the first spring storm is the best of all. You think about his description of the ideal tea drinker, someone who approaches the preparation of tea with the same seriousness that a calligrapher approaches a brushstroke, or a musician approaches a note, someone who understands that every variable in the process, from the hardness of the water to the temperature of the fire to the thickness of the bowl, affects the final result, and that mastery consists not in controlling every variable perfectly, but in developing the sensitivity to adjust on the fly, to compensate for what the water is telling you, what the fire is telling you, what the leaves are telling you. Lu Yu did not invent tea drinking. Tea had been consumed in China for centuries before he was born, and he knew that. What he did was give the practice a vocabulary and a philosophy, and in doing so, he transformed something that people did out of habit into something that people did with intention. You set down your bowl and look out the window of the tea house. The street outside is busy, but the noise seems distant, filtered through the thick wooden frame and the paper-covered window. You watch a cart pass by, pulled by a water buffalo, its wheels squeaking in a rhythm that is almost musical. The cart is loaded with bricks of compressed tea, still the standard form of tea for transport and trade, even though the whipped method has replaced the boiled method in the cities. The bricks are wrapped in bamboo leaves and tied with hemp cord, and they look like nothing more than building materials until you know what they contain. Each brick represents months of labor, the picking of the leaves, the steaming or pan-firing to stop oxidation, the pressing into molds, the drying over slow fires, the wrapping and the stacking, and the loading onto carts and boats and the backs of camels. You think about the journey those bricks will take. Some of them will travel north along the Grand Canal to the capital, where they will be sold in markets and served in the finest teahouses. Some will travel west along the Silk Road, through the mountains and the deserts, to Central Asia and beyond, where they will be traded for horses and jade and spices. Some will travel south to the ports of Guangzhou and Quanzhou, where they will be loaded onto ships bound for Southeast Asia and India and the Arabian Peninsula. The tea trade is the artery of a vast commercial network, and the bricks on that cart are the lifeblood moving through it. You order another bowl of tea. The attendant, a young man with a towel draped over his shoulder, nods and disappears into the back room. You hear the clink of ceramic and the hiss of water, and then he returns with a fresh bowl. The foam is perfect, white and dense, and the liquid beneath it is the color of jade held up to the light. You thank him, and he nods again and moves on to the next table. You lift the bowl and drink, and the tea is different from the first one. Not worse, just different. A different batch of leaves, perhaps, or water drawn from a different well, or a slightly different temperature. The variation is part of the experience. You learn to expect it and to appreciate it. The way that you learn to appreciate the way a piece of music sounds different each time you hear it, depending on the acoustics of the room and the quality of the instrument and the mood of the performer. Time passes. You are not sure how much. In the tea house, time does not move in straight lines. It pools and eddies, and sometimes reverses direction altogether. You close your eyes, and when you open them, you are in a workshop. The workshop is dimly lit, with high windows covered in translucent paper that diffuses the daylight into a soft glow. The air is warm and smells of clay and wood smoke and something acrid that you cannot identify at first. You realize it is the smell of the kiln, the great brick structure at the back of the workshop that dominates the space like a sleeping animal. A potter is working at a wheel in the center of the room, his hands deep in a mound of wet clay. You watch him, mesmerized. His hands move with a kind of intelligence that seems to bypass his conscious mind. The clay rises under his fingers, spinning into a cylinder, and then his thumbs press inward, and the cylinder becomes a bowl. The walls thin and even out, and the rim takes shape. And within seconds, the object that will eventually hold your tea is born from nothing but earth and water and pressure and time. You can see the concentration on his face, the way his eyes are fixed on the spinning clay, reading it the way you read the surface of the water in the kettle. He is not just shaping the bowl. He is listening to it. The clay tells him when it is ready to be thinned, when it is ready to be shaped, when it is ready to be released. He uses a wire to cut the bowl free from the wheel, and he lifts it onto a wooden board with a movement so gentle that the bowl barely trembles. You walk over to a shelf of finished pieces and examine them. They are raw, unfired, the color of dried mud, and they feel rough against your fingertips. Some of them are simple bowls, round and unadorned, designed for everyday use. Others are more elaborate. You pick up a small ewer, its handle shaped like a bamboo branch, its spout curved like a bird's beak. The detail is extraordinary. Every leaf on the bamboo branch is individually sculpted, and the veins on each leaf are visible if you hold it close to your eye. You set it down carefully and pick up a tea caddy, a small lidded container used for storing the precious tea powder. The lid is carved with a scene of mountains and clouds, and the carving is so fine that the clouds look like they are actually moving. You run your finger along the edge of the lid and feel the smooth transition from the flat surface to the carved relief. It is the work of months, perhaps years, and it will be used to hold something that will be consumed in minutes. The disproportion does not bother you. It is part of the logic of this world that the vessel should be as beautiful as the thing it contains, that the act of drinking tea should be framed by objects worthy of the attention that the tea itself demands. You move to the kiln. It is massive, built from fire brick and clay, and its mouth is a dark opening that leads into a chamber large enough to stand in. Inside, you can see the shelves stacked with ceramic pieces, each separated from the next by small clay supports called spurs that will leave tiny marks on the bottom of each piece. The potter has told you that he will fire the kiln tonight. He will build a fire in the firebox at the front and feed it with wood for hours, gradually raising the temperature until it reaches the point where the clay vitrifies and the glaze melts and flows. You ask him what kind of glaze he is using, and he shows you a bucket of white liquid that looks like thin milk. It is a feldspathic glaze made from ground stone and ash and water, and when it fires, it will turn into a glassy coating that makes the ceramic waterproof and gives it its characteristic sheen. He dips a bowl into the glaze, and it emerges coated in the white liquid, dripping and uneven. He sets it on a shelf to dry, and you can already see that the unevenness will disappear in the fire. The glaze will melt and flow and find its own level, and the bowl will emerge transformed. You think about the kiln fire. It is not something you can rush. The firing takes all night, and the potter will not sleep. He will sit by the kiln and feed the fire and watch the temperature through a small opening, adjusting the airflow by opening and closing vents, adding wood when the temperature drops, reducing it when the temperature rises too high. The difference between a successful firing and a failed one can be as small as a shift in the wind, or a piece of damp wood that smolders instead of glowing cleanly. You think about the patience this requires. The potter has invested weeks in shaping these bowls and ewers and caddies, and he has invested days in drying them and glazing them. And now he will invest a single night in firing them. And at the end of that night, he will know whether his investment has paid off. He will open the kiln and pull out the pieces one by one, and some of them will be perfect, and some of them will be cracked or warped or discolored, and he will set the perfect ones aside and discard the rest. The discard rate is high. Maybe 1 in 3 pieces survives the firing intact. You think about the economics of this, about the cost of the clay and the glaze and the wood and the labor, all of it invested in objects that might not survive their own creation. And then you think about the fact that the potter does it anyway, every week, because the perfect pieces, the ones that come out of the kiln with a surface like ice and a form like a poem, are worth all the failures that preceded them. You leave the workshop and walk into the street. It is evening now, and the light is fading, and the street is lined with lanterns that cast a warm, flickering glow on the faces of the people passing by. You smell food cooking. A vendor is grilling skewers of meat over a charcoal fire, and the smoke is thick and savory. Next to him, another vendor is selling steamed buns from a bamboo steamer, and the steam rises in great white clouds that smell of wheat and pork and ginger. You are hungry, but you are also thirsty, and the two sensations are connected in a way that they are not in the world you came from. In your world, you eat and you drink as separate acts, usually at separate times, often from separate containers. Here, they are woven together, and the tea is as much a part of the meal as the food, not just something you consume to quench your thirst, but something that transforms the food, that cuts through the richness of the meat and the heaviness of the bun, and leaves your palate clean and ready for the next bite. You find a small stall at the edge of the market, tucked between a shop selling ink sticks and a stall selling dried fish. The stall has a wooden counter and 2 stools, and behind it stands a woman who looks like she has been making tea for most of her life. Her hair is gray and tied back in a bun, and her hands are thick and strong, the hands of someone who has lifted kettles and whisked bowls and washed ceramics thousands of times. She nods to you, and you sit on one of the stools. She does not ask you what you want. She knows. She reaches for a small ceramic pot and fills it with water from a larger container, then sets it on a charcoal brazier built into the counter. The brazier is lined with ash, and the charcoal glows a deep, steady red. You watch the water heat. The pot is unglazed clay, and as the water inside warms, you can see the outside of the pot darken slightly, the moisture being driven out of the clay by the heat. The woman takes a small scoop of tea leaves from a tin and drops them into the pot. The leaves are loose this time, not powdered, and they curl and twist like dried seaweed. They are green, but a dark, almost olive green, and you can see that they have been roasted, not steamed, which means they will have a different character from the whipped tea you had earlier. The water begins to simmer. You hear it before you see it, a soft bubbling sound from inside the pot. The woman lifts the lid, and a cloud of steam escapes, carrying with it the scent of the tea. It is roasted and nutty, with a sweetness that reminds you of toasted barley. She pours the water over the leaves and replaces the lid. The pot sits on the brazier and steeps, and you watch the woman's face. She is not looking at the pot. She is looking past it, at something you cannot see, and her expression is calm and distant, the expression of someone who has done this so many times that the doing has become a kind of thinking. After what seems like exactly the right amount of time, she lifts the pot and pours the tea into a small cup. The cup is ceramic, pale blue, and the glaze has a network of fine cracks that the Chinese call crazing. The cracks are not flaws. They are intentional, created by the differential shrinkage of the glaze and the clay body during cooling. And they are valued for the way they catch the light and give the surface a texture that is almost organic. You take the cup in your hand. It is small, no bigger than the first joint of your thumb, and the tea inside is a golden color, clear and bright. You drink. The taste is completely different from anything you have had so far. It is warmer, deeper, more rounded. The roasting has brought out flavors that the steaming process would have suppressed, and you taste caramel and dried fruit and something almost chocolatey, though chocolate is a thing that exists on the other side of the world and will not reach China for another 5 centuries. The tea sits on your tongue and spreads, and you feel it in your chest, a warmth that is physical and emotional at the same time. You set the cup down and exhale, and the woman nods. She knows what you are feeling. She has made this tea 10,000 times, and she knows exactly what it does to people. You sit at the stall for a while longer, drinking cup after cup of tea, and the night deepens around you. The market closes. The lanterns are extinguished one by one, and the street grows dark. The vendor with the skewers packs up his grill, and the vendor with the steamed buns carries his steamer away on a shoulder pole, the bamboo creaking under the weight. You are alone with the tea woman, and she does not rush you. In this world, there is no such thing as closing time. Not really. There is only the natural end of things, the point at which the fire burns out and the water cools and the last cup has been drunk, and there is nothing left to do but go home and sleep. When you finally rise to leave, the woman hands you a small packet wrapped in paper. Inside, you can feel the texture of dried tea leaves, and you know that she has given you something from her personal supply, something that she would not sell at the stall. You thank her, and she nods, and you walk home through the dark streets, the packet clutched in your hand, the taste of tea still on your tongue. You wake the next morning, or perhaps you never slept, and you find yourself in a different place. You are standing on a dock, and the water in front of you is wide and brown and moving slowly. The river is the Yangtze, and you can feel its power even from the stillness of the dock. The boats moored along the shore are flat-bottomed and wide, designed for carrying cargo rather than passengers, and their decks are piled high with sacks and crates and bundles. You can see tea among them, the familiar bamboo-wrapped bricks, stacked in neat rows and secured with ropes that have been tightened until they bite into the bamboo. You walk along the dock and examine the boats. Each one has a name painted on its prow in black characters, and each one has a crew of 2 or 3 men who are checking the rigging, loading the last of the cargo, or simply sitting on the deck smoking pipes and watching the river. You step onto one of the boats. The deck is wooden and slightly uneven, the planks worn smooth by years of use, and you can feel the gentle rocking of the boat as it shifts in the current. The captain is a man with a face like leather, tanned and lined by years of sun and wind, and he is standing at the stern with his hands on the long pole that he will use to push the boat away from the dock. He looks at you and nods, and you understand that you are welcome. You sit down on a stack of tea bricks and watch the river. The water is the color of strong tea, and the irony does not escape you. The river carries the tea downstream, and the river itself looks like tea. And the people who drink the tea will never see the river that carried it. And the people who sail the river will never drink the tea they carry. The separation between producer and consumer, between the thing and its journey, is complete, and the tea exists in the space between them as a kind of ghost, a substance that is everywhere and nowhere at once. The captain pushes off, and the boat begins to move. The water slips past the hull with a soft hissing sound, and the shore begins to recede. You watch the buildings of the city shrink and merge and disappear, and the landscape opens up into something wider and wilder. The river is flanked by hills on both sides, and the hills are covered in trees and shrubs and the occasional patch of cultivated land. You see terraces cut into the slopes, and you know that some of them are tea plantations, though you cannot see the individual bushes from this distance. The river bends, and the hills shift, and the sky above you is a pale, washed-out blue that suggests heat without the discomfort of it. You breathe in deeply. The air is different here, heavier and more humid, and it carries the scent of the river itself, a smell of wet mud and aquatic plants and fish that is not unpleasant, but is definitely present. The journey will take days, perhaps weeks, depending on the destination. The tea boats move at the speed of the current, which is slow enough that you can see individual fish breaking the surface and individual birds diving from the sky. The crew works in shifts. One man pulls at the stern, guiding the boat through the shallows and keeping it centered in the channel. Another man sits at the bow, watching for obstacles, calling out warnings when he sees a submerged log or a sandbar or another boat approaching from the opposite direction. The captain moves between them, adjusting the pole, checking the cargo, scanning the horizon. You watch them work, and you notice the rhythm of their movements. They are not rushed, but they are not idle. They are doing exactly what needs to be done, at the pace that the river demands, and the pace is slower than anything you are used to. The river does not care about your schedule. The river moves when it moves, and you move with it, and the tea moves with you, and the whole system is held together by a kind of implicit agreement between human beings and water that has existed for thousands of years. Night falls on the river. The crew moors the boat to a tree on the bank, builds a small fire on the shore, and cooks a simple meal of rice and dried fish. You eat with them, sitting on the ground with your legs crossed, and the food tastes better than it would in any restaurant because of the context. The fire is warm against your face, and the river is cool behind your back, and the tea bricks are stacked neatly beside you, a reminder of the purpose of this journey. After dinner, the captain opens a small tin and prepares tea. He does it with the same casual competence as the woman at the market stall. But the setting is different, and the difference matters. There is no counter, no brazier, no ceramic cup. He uses a simple iron pot and pours the tea into a shared bowl that is passed from hand to hand. The tea is rougher than what you had in the tea house, less refined, but it has an honesty to it that you find appealing. It tastes like the river tastes, like the earth tastes, like the life of people who work with their hands and their bodies and their patience. You drink from the bowl when it comes to you, and the warmth spreads through your hands and up your arms and into your chest, and you feel connected to everything around you in a way that is hard to explain, but easy to feel. The crew sleeps on the boat, wrapped in blankets that smell of wood smoke and river water. You lie down beside them, and the rocking of the boat against the current is a kind of lullaby, steady and predictable and deeply soothing. You close your eyes, and the sounds of the river fill your mind. The water lapping against the hull, the creak of the wooden planks, the occasional call of a night bird from the trees on the bank, the soft breathing of the crew members sleeping around you. You drift into sleep, and in your sleep you dream of tea. You dream of leaves growing on mountainsides, of hands picking them and baskets filling up, of fires glowing and water boiling and steam rising, of bowls being lifted to lips, and tea being swallowed and warmth spreading through bodies, of boats on rivers and camels on deserts and ships on oceans, of a substance that has traveled across time and space and culture and language to become the most important drink in the world. And you understand, in the way that you understand things in dreams, that the tea is not just a drink, it is a medium. It is the thing through which people connect to each other and to the world around them. And the connection is real, and it is tangible, and it is as simple as lifting a bowl to your lips and letting the warmth fill your mouth. You wake before dawn. The sky is gray, and the air is cold, and the river is quiet. The crew is already moving, stoking the fire, eating the remains of last night's meal, checking the mooring lines. You sit up and stretch, and your body feels rested in a way that it rarely feels in the world you came from. captain hands you a bowl of hot water, and you drink it slowly, feeling it warm you from the inside out. Then he pushes off, and the journey resumes. The days pass. The river narrows, and the current quickens, and the crew has to work harder, poling and pulling and guiding the boat through rapids that you had not known existed. You watch them, and you are impressed not by their strength, but by their coordination. They move as a unit, each person knowing exactly what the others are doing and adjusting accordingly. When the boat enters a rapid, the bowman calls out the depth of the water. The stern man adjusts the angle of the pole, and the captain stands in the middle, watching everything, making micro-corrections that keep the boat from grounding or capsizing. The T bricks shift slightly under the movement, but they do not fall. The ropes hold. The system works. You think about the T itself as you watch the crew work. You think about how far these leaves have traveled, not just in distance, but in transformation. They were picked on a mountainside, perhaps hundreds of miles upstream, by hands that selected only the youngest shoots. They were then processed, either steamed or pan-fired or roasted, to stop the oxidation and preserve the green character of the leaf. They were then dried and compressed and wrapped and stacked and loaded onto a cart and driven to a warehouse and loaded onto this boat. And now they are moving down the river toward a market where they will be sold to merchants who will distribute them to tea houses and homes and monasteries and palaces. Each step in this process adds value, not just economic value, but cultural value. The tea that arrives at the market is not the same substance that was picked on the mountain. It has been transformed by human labor and human knowledge, and the transformation is what makes it valuable. The leaf itself is common. The process is rare. The boat reaches its destination in the late afternoon of the 5th day. The dock is larger than the one you left, and the city behind it is larger too, with buildings that rise several stories and streets that are paved with stone. You help unload the tea, carrying the bamboo-wrapped bricks up the gangplank and stacking them in a warehouse that smells of dust and dried leaves and the faint, sweet residue of previous shipments. The merchant who receives the tea is a thin man with a long beard and a ledger that he consults with the gravity of a judge consulting a law book. He inspects each brick, tapping it with his knuckles to check for cracks, sniffing it to assess the aroma, and comparing it to the samples he has been provided. He nods occasionally, makes notes in his ledger, and occasionally rejects a brick, setting it aside for return. The process is slow and meticulous, and you can see that it matters. The quality of the tea determines the price, and the price determines everything else. The merchant's reputation depends on it, and his reputation is the only currency that matters in a world without brand names and advertising. When the unloading is complete, the captain pays his crew and they disperse, heading for the taverns and the brothels and the gambling houses that cluster around the dock. You watch them go, and you feel a pang of something that is not quite sadness, but is close to it. The journey is over, and the connection you felt with the crew and the river and the tea is dissolving. And you know that you will not see any of them again, but you also know that the tea will continue its journey, and that in some tea house somewhere, someone will brew it and drink it, and the warmth that you felt on the boat will be felt by that person too, across time and space, in a kind of chain of warmth that stretches from the mountain, where the leaf was picked to the mouth, where the tea is finally consumed. You walk into the city. The streets are crowded and noisy, and the smells are overwhelming. You pass by a meat vendor's shop where the cuts of meat rest from hooks, and a fishmonger's stall where the fish are arranged on beds of ice, and a spice merchant's shop where the air is thick with the scents of cinnamon and clove and star anise. You pass by a silk weaver's workshop where the looms clack and rattle in a rhythm that is almost musical, and a papermaker's shop where the workers press wet sheets of pulp onto screens and rest them to dry. The city is a machine, and every part of it serves a purpose, and the tea you just unloaded is one of the gears that keeps the machine turning. You think about the tea houses in this city, how many there must be, how many cups of tea are consumed every day, how many conversations happen over bowls of tea, how many deals are struck, how many poems are composed, how many hearts are broken and mended and broken again. The tea is the medium for all of it, and the medium is invisible, like the air you breathe. You only notice it when it is gone. You find a tea house near the center of the city, and you go inside. It is larger than the ones you have visited before, with multiple floors and a central courtyard where a tree grows, its branches reaching up toward the open sky. You climb the stairs to the second floor and find a table by the window. The view is of the street below, and you watch the people passing by with the kind of detachment that comes from being a stranger in a strange land. An attendant comes to your table and asks what you want, and you say tea, and he nods and leaves. A few minutes later, he returns with a pot of tea and a stack of small cups. The tea is green, and it has been brewed using the loose leaf method that has become increasingly popular in recent years. You pour yourself a cup and drink. It is good, but it is not great. It is the tea of a busy city, brewed quickly and served quickly and consumed quickly, and it lacks the depth and the subtlety of the tea you had on the mountain or on the boat. But it is warm, and it is wet, and it does what tea is supposed to do, which is to make you feel a little more present and a little less alone. You sit in the tea house for a long time. The afternoon passes. The light crests from the harsh white of midday to the golden amber of late afternoon, and the shadows in the courtyard lengthen and merge. The other patrons come and go. Some stay for a single cup and leave. Others stay for hours, reading or writing or talking in low voices. You watch them all, and you feel a sense of connection that is hard to explain. You do not know any of these people. You will never see most of them again. but you are sharing this space with them, and you are all drinking tea, and the tea is the same, and the warmth it provides is the same. And in a world that is often cold and indifferent, that shared warmth is enough. The sun sets. The tea house lights lanterns, and the light they cast is warm and soft and makes everything look a little more beautiful than it actually is. You order another pot of tea, and the attendant brings it, and you pour yourself a cup and drink it slowly, savoring each sip. The tea has cooled slightly, and the crest in temperature has crested the flavor. It is less sharp, more rounded, and the sweetness that was barely perceptible in the hot tea is now more prominent. You think about this, about how the same substance can taste different at different temperatures, and you realize that this is a metaphor for everything. People are different at different times, in different contexts, under different conditions, and the tea is no exception. The leaf that was picked on the mountain is not the same leaf that is in your cup. It has been transformed by fire and water and time and distance, and the transformation is what makes it interesting. You leave the tea house as the city settles into night. The streets are quieter now, and the lanterns cast pools of light on the cobblestones. You walk without a destination, letting your feet carry you where they will. The tea you have drunk is warm in your stomach, and the warmth spreads outward into your limbs and your chest and your head, and you feel a kind of lightness that you have not felt before. It is not the lightness of intoxication. It is something else, something cleaner and more precise. It is the lightness of presence, of being fully in the moment without the weight of the past or the anxiety of the future. The tea has given you this, and you are grateful. You find yourself back at the warehouse where the tea was unloaded. It is locked and dark, but you can smell it from the outside. The scent of dried tea leaves, faint but persistent, seeping through the cracks in the wooden door. You stand in front of it for a moment, breathing in the smell, and then you turn and walk back to the inn where you are staying. The streets are almost empty now, and the only sound is your footsteps on the cobblestones, rhythmic and steady and deeply calming. You reach the inn, climb the stairs to your room, and sit on the edge of the bed. Your body is tired, but it is a good tired, the kind that comes from a day of movement and observation and connection. You lie down and close your eyes, and the taste of tea is still on your tongue, faint but persistent, like the last note of a song that you cannot quite remember, but that you know will come back to you in the morning. You sleep, and when you wake, you are somewhere else again. You are in a garden. It is a song dynasty garden, which means it is not a garden in the Western sense. It is not a collection of flowers arranged in patterns, or a lawn surrounded by hedges. It is a landscape in miniature, a carefully constructed representation of the natural world that is designed to be experienced, not just visually, but viscerally. You walk along a path of flat stones set in white gravel, and the stones are placed at irregular intervals so that your steps are never quite predictable. The gravel crunches under your feet, and the sound is sharp and satisfying. To your left is a pond, and the pond is still, and its surface reflects the sky and the trees and the rocks that have been placed around its edge with the precision of a painter composing a scene. To your right is a rockery, a collection of stones arranged in a way that mimics the natural erosion of mountains. And the stones are covered in moss and small plants that have taken root in the cracks and crevices. You find a pavilion at the center of the garden. It is open on all sides, with a tiled roof supported by wooden columns. And inside, there is a low table and several cushions. You sit down on one of the cushions and look out over the pond. The water is dark, almost black, and the reflection of the sky on its surface is so perfect that it takes you a moment to realize that the clouds you see are not in the sky above you, but in the water below you. The garden is designed to confuse the boundaries between inside and outside, between the natural and the constructed, between the real and the represented. You are meant to lose yourself in it, to forget where the garden ends and the world begins. And you find that you are losing yourself very easily. A servant appears at the edge of the pavilion, carrying a tray. On the tray is a tea set, a small teapot, 2 cups, and a container of tea powder. The servant sets the tray down on the table and bows, then disappears without a word. You are alone again, and you are grateful for it. You reach for the teapot and examine it. It is small, no larger than your fist, and it is made of purple clay from Yixing, a type of clay that is prized for its porosity and its ability to absorb the flavors of the tea brewed in it. The teapot is unglazed, and the surface is smooth and slightly warm from the servant's hands. You open the lid and peer inside. It is clean and dry, and you can smell faint traces of previous teas, the ghost of flavors that have been absorbed into the clay over months or years of use. You set the lid aside and pick up the container of tea powder. It is a light green powder, finely ground, and you can see that it has been sifted to remove any coarse particles. You take a small scoop and drop the powder into the teapot. The powder settles at the bottom, and for a moment it looks like nothing more than dust. You pour hot water into the teapot. The water is just off the boil, and it hits the powder with a soft hiss. The powder swirls and rises, and the water turns a pale green. You replace the lid and wait. The waiting is important. The tea needs time to steep, to release its flavors into the water, and the amount of time depends on the temperature of the water, the fineness of the powder, and the type of tea. You have no way of knowing the exact parameters, but you trust your instincts. You count to 30 in your head, then lift the teapot and pour. The tea flows into the cup in a thin stream, and the color is luminous, a green so pale that it is almost yellow. You lift the cup to your lips and breathe in. The aroma is fresh and clean, with notes of grass and spring rain and something faintly floral. You drink. The taste is light and delicate, and and it makes you think of the first day of spring, when the air is still cold, but there is a hint of warmth in the sun. The tea is not meant to be a statement. It is meant to be a suggestion, a whisper rather than a shout, and it succeeds. You drink slowly, letting each sip linger on your tongue before you swallow. The aftertaste is clean and long, and it leaves your mouth feeling refreshed and awake. You set the cup down and look out over the pond again. The surface of the water has not crested, but your perception of it has. You see things you did not see before. The way the light catches on the edge of a lily pad, the way a single leaf drifts across the surface, carried by a current you cannot see. The way the reflection of a cloud shifts and dissolves and reforms as the cloud moves across the sky. The garden is teaching you to look, and the tea is teaching you to taste, and the two lessons are the same lesson. Attention is everything. You pour yourself a second cup. The teapot still has tea in it, and you can see that the second infusion is a different color from the first. It is slightly darker, slightly more intense, and you understand that the leaves, or rather the powder, still have more to give. Good tea can be steeped multiple times, and each infusion reveals a different aspect of its character. The first is the most delicate, the surface impression. The second is deeper, more complex, with flavors that were hidden in the first infusion beginning to emerge. The third is the strongest, the most concentrated, and it is often the most rewarding for those who have the patience to reach it. You drink the second cup, and it is indeed different from the first. The grassy note is still there, but now there is an underlying sweetness, a honeyed quality that was not apparent before, and the finish is longer, more resonant. You set the cup down and close your eyes, and the garden seems to expand around you. The sounds of birds and wind and water becoming clearer and more distinct. The colors more saturated, the textures more pronounced. The tea has sharpened your senses, and you are grateful for it. You sit in the pavilion for a long time. The sun moves across the sky, and the shadows in the garden shift and crest. The pond catches the light at different angles, and the reflections on its surface transform from clouds to trees to sky to nothing. You drink tea until the teapot is empty, and then you sit with the empty pot in your hands, feeling the weight of it, the warmth of it, the history of it. You think about the hands that made this pot, shaping the clay on a wheel, smoothing the surface with a wet sponge, carving the spout and the handle, firing it in a kiln that heated through the night. You think about the hands that picked the tea leaves on a mountainside, selecting only the youngest shoots, carrying them in bamboo baskets down to the processing house. You think about the hands that ground the tea into powder, turning the coarse leaves into something fine and uniform. You think about the hands that carried the tea to the market, and the hands that bought it, and the hands that brought it to this garden. The chain of hands stretches back through time and space, and you are the last link in the chain, the one who lifts the cup to the lips and swallows and feels the warmth spread through the body. It is a humble position, and it is a privileged one, and you accept both facts without contradiction. A breeze moves through the garden, and the leaves on the trees rustle. The sound is soft and rhythmic, and it reminds you of the sound of the tea being whisked in the bowl. The rapid clicking of the bamboo tines against the ceramic. You close your eyes and let the sound fill your mind, and you feel yourself drifting, not into sleep, but into something adjacent to it. A state of relaxed awareness in which the boundaries between yourself and the world around you begin to soften. The garden is no longer something you are observing. It is something you are part of, and the tea is no longer something you are drinking. It is something you are becoming. The caffeine in the tea is alerting your mind, but the ritual of drinking it is calming your body, and the two effects work together to create a state that is neither fully awake nor fully asleep, but something in between. Something that the Chinese have known about for centuries, and that the rest of the world is only beginning to understand. You open your eyes. The light has crested. The sun is lower now, and the garden is bathed in a golden light that makes everything look as if it is made of honey. The pond is a sheet of liquid gold, and the trees are outlined in light, and the rocks in the rockery glow with an inner warmth that you can almost feel from where you are sitting. You rise from the cushion and walk to the edge of the pond. The water is warm, heated by the sun, and you dip your fingers into it. The sensation is unexpected. The water is not cold, as you expected, but warm, and it feels like silk against your skin. You watch the ripples spread outward from your fingers, and you think about the way that everything you do creates ripples. Consequences that spread outward and touch things you cannot see and will never know about. The tea you drank today will affect you for hours, and the effect will spread to the things you do and the people you interact with, and those people will be affected in turn, and the ripples will continue long after you are gone. It is a comforting thought, and it is also a humbling one. You return to the pavilion and sit down. The tea set is still on the table, and you clean it slowly and carefully, wiping each piece with a soft cloth, drying it, and setting it back on the tray. The servant will return for the tray, but you do not know when, and it does not matter. The act of cleaning is part of the ritual, and you give it the same attention that you gave to the drinking. You wipe the teapot inside and out, making sure that no residue remains. You wipe the cups, turning them in your hands to reach every surface. You wipe the tray, and you arrange the pieces on it in a pattern that is pleasing to the eye. When you are finished, you sit back and look at your work. The tea set is clean and orderly, and it is ready for the next person who will use it. And the thought of that person, whoever they are, sitting in this pavilion and drinking from these cups and feeling the warmth that you felt, fills you with a quiet satisfaction. You leave the garden as the sun sets behind the trees. The path out is different from the path in, and you walk it slowly, taking in the sights and sounds and smells that you missed on the way in. The white gravel crunches under your feet, and the sound is louder now that the garden is quiet. The pond is dark, and the reflections on its surface are gone, replaced by the flat blackness of water in shadow. The rockery is a collection of shadows, and the moss on the stones looks like velvet in the fading light. You reach the gate and step through it, and the garden is behind you, and you know that you will carry it with you for a long time, not as a memory, but as a feeling, the feeling of being present and connected and at peace. You walk through the streets of the city as night falls. The lanterns are lit, and the light they cast is warm and golden, and it makes the buildings look softer and the people look friendlier. You pass by a tea house, and you can see people inside, sitting at tables and drinking and talking, and you feel a pang of longing for the community that the tea house represents. You pass by a market, and the vendors are packing up their goods, and the air smells of food and smoke, and the faint sweetness of fruit that has been left out too long. You pass by a temple, and the gates are closed, and the courtyard is dark and quiet, and you feel a sense of reverence that has nothing to do with belief and everything to do with the recognition of something larger than yourself. You walk until your feet are tired, and then you find an inn and climb the stairs to your room and lie down on the bed and close your eyes. The taste of tea is still on your tongue. The warmth is still in your chest. The garden is still in your mind. And as you drift toward sleep, you feel the boundaries between all of these things dissolving. The taste becoming the warmth, becoming the garden, becoming the night, becoming the sleep, becoming the dream. And in the dream, you are back on the mountain, and the mist is rising, and the tea bushes are green, and the picker is working, and the kettle is humming, and the bowl is full, and you lift it to your lips and drink, and the warmth spreads through your body, and you know that this is what it means to be alive, to be present, to be connected to the world through the simplest of acts, the act of drinking a cup of tea. You sleep deeply, and when you wake, the dream is still with you, lingering at the edges of consciousness like the aftertaste of a good tea, faint but persistent. A reminder that the world is larger and more beautiful than you usually allow yourself to believe. You lie in bed for a while, letting the dream fade at its own pace, and then you rise and begin the day, carrying the warmth of the tea and the stillness of the garden with you like a secret that you will share with no one, but that will inform everything you do. The days that follow are a blur of movement and sensation. You travel from city to city, from garden to garden, from tea house to tea house, and each place has its own character, its own way of preparing and serving tea, its own philosophy of what the drink should be and do. In one city, the tea is served in large bowls, and the people drink it quickly and loudly, and the atmosphere is boisterous and social. In another, the tea is served in tiny cups, and the people sip it slowly and silently, and the atmosphere is contemplative and almost monastic. In one garden, the tea is brewed with water from a spring that bubbles up from the rocks, and the taste is crisp and mineral, and unlike anything you have experienced before. In another, the tea is brewed with rainwater collected in ceramic jars, and the taste is soft and sweet and almost floral. You learn to appreciate the differences, to find value in each variation, to understand that there is no single correct way to prepare or consume tea, only the way that works for the people who are drinking it at that particular moment, in that particular place. You begin to notice the rituals that surround tea drinking in each place you visit. In some tea houses, the attendant pours the tea in a specific way, holding the pot at a certain angle and pouring from a certain height, and the method is passed down from generation to generation and is considered essential to the proper preparation of the drink. In others, the customers are expected to pour their own tea, and the act of pouring is seen as a form of participation in the ritual, a way of taking responsibility for one's own experience. In some places, the tea is accompanied by small snacks, dried fruits or nuts or sweet pastries, and the combination of flavors is carefully calibrated to complement the tea. In others, the tea is consumed on its own, without accompaniment, and the purity of the experience is considered paramount. You observe all of these variations without judgment, and you find that your own preferences shift depending on your mood and your surroundings. Sometimes you want the simplicity of a single cup of tea in silence. Sometimes you want the complexity of a tea paired with food in the company of others. Both are valid. Both are beautiful. Both are tea. You think about the poetry that tea has inspired. In this era, poetry is not a hobby or a profession, but a way of life. And the connection between tea and poetry is so deep that it is difficult to separate the two. Poets write about tea, and tea inspires poetry, and the two art forms feed each other in a cycle of mutual enrichment. You have heard poems recited in tea houses, the verses flowing from the lips of scholars who have memorized them, and who deliver them with the same care and attention that they bring to the preparation of their tea. The poems are about many things, but tea is a frequent subject, and the descriptions of tea in poetry are some of the most vivid and evocative passages you have ever encountered. You remember one poem in particular, recited by an old man in a tea house in Hangzhou, his voice thin and reedy, but full of emotion. The poem described the process of picking tea on a spring morning, the dew on the leaves, the mist on the mountain, the careful selection of the youngest shoots, and it did so in such a way that you felt you were there, your fingers brushing against the wet leaves, your lungs filling with the cool, damp air, your basket filling with the fragrant green buds. The poem was only 8 lines long, but it contained an entire world, and you understood why people in this era considered poetry to be as essential to human life as food and shelter. It was a way of capturing experience, of preserving it in language so that it could be shared and relived by others. and the tea was the medium through which the experience was transmitted, the physical substance that connected the poet to the reader, the past to the present, the mountain to the cup. You think about the ceramics that tea has inspired. The demand for beautiful tea vessels has driven the development of ceramic technology to heights that you find almost unbelievable. The kilns of this era produce wares of such quality and beauty that they are treasured not just in China, but throughout the known world, carried along trade routes to places where the people who use them have never seen the mountains where the clay was dug, or the kilns where it was fired. You have seen these wares in the collections of wealthy merchants and in the humble homes of ordinary people, and the quality is consistent across all of them. The bowls are thin and light, almost translucent when held up to the light, and the glazes are smooth and even, with colors that range from the pure white of fresh snow to the deep celadon of a tropical lagoon. You have learned to appreciate the subtle differences between the wares of different kilns. The way that the Yeoju kilns produce a celadon with a slightly bluish tint. The way that the Longquin kilns produce a celadon with a slightly greenish tint. The way that the Jingdezhen kilns produce a white porcelain so pure and so fine that it seems to glow from within. Each kiln has its own character, its own signature, and the experts can identify the origin of a piece just by looking at it. The way that a sommelier can identify the origin of a wine by tasting it. The ceramics are not just containers. They are works of art, and they are inseparable from the tea they contain, each enhancing the other in a relationship that is as old as tea drinking itself. You think about the trade routes that carry tea to the far corners of the known world. The Silk Road is not just a road for silk. It is a road for everything, and tea is one of the most important commodities that travels along it. You have seen the caravans that carry tea westward, the camels loaded with crates and bundles, their handlers walking alongside them in the dust and the heat, their faces covered against the sun and the wind. You have seen the ships that carry tea southward, the junks with their high prows and their square sails, their holds packed with tea bricks and ceramic wares, and silk and porcelain, their crews of sailors and merchants and adventurers who risk everything for the chance to reach the markets of Southeast Asia and India and the Arabian Peninsula. You have seen the boats that carry tea northward along the Grand Canal, the flat-bottomed vessels that move slowly and steadily through the water, their cargo of tea destined for the capital and the cities of the north, where the climate is colder and the tea is more valued, where a cup of tea on a winter morning is not just a pleasure but a necessity. The tea trade is vast, and it is complex, and it is held together by the same principles that hold together everything else in this world: patience, attention, and the willingness to invest time and effort in something that may not yield its full value for months or years. You think about the role of tea in diplomacy. Tea is not just a drink. It is a symbol, And the symbols matter in a world where formal relationships between people and between states are governed by ritual and convention. When an ambassador arrives at a foreign court, he is offered tea, and the way the tea is prepared and served communicates volumes about the relationship between the two parties. A cup of the finest tea, served in the most beautiful vessel by the most skilled attendant, is a sign of respect and goodwill. A cup of ordinary tea, served hastily and without ceremony, is a sign of indifference or even hostility. The nuances are subtle, but they are real, and the diplomats of this era understand them instinctively. You have witnessed a diplomatic reception in which the serving of tea was the most important event of the evening, and you understood why. The tea was the medium through which the two parties communicated their intentions, their respect, their willingness to engage, and the success or failure of the reception depended as much on the quality of the tea as on the words that were spoken. It is a world in which the details matter, and the tea is one of the most important details of all. You think about the daily life of ordinary people and the role that tea plays in it. Tea is not just for the wealthy and the educated. It is for everyone, and its universality is one of the things that makes it so remarkable. You have seen laborers drinking tea from chipped bowls during their breaks, the tea strong and bitter, and exactly what they need to sustain them through another hour of hard work. You have seen mothers brewing tea for their children, the tea weak and sweet, and served in bowls that are passed from hand to hand. A moment of connection in the midst of a day filled with chores and responsibilities. You have seen old men sitting in the sun outside their homes, sipping tea slowly and watching the world go by, their faces lined and peaceful, their lives shaped by decades of ritual and routine. Tea is woven into the fabric of daily life in a way that is so natural and so complete that it is almost invisible. And you realize that this is the highest form of cultural achievement. When something so profound becomes so ordinary that people no longer notice it. When the art of tea is no longer an art, but simply life. The nights grow longer, the days grow shorter, and you find yourself returning to the mountain, the one you started on, the one where the mist rises and the tea bushes grow in terraces carved into the stone. You climb the path slowly, and the air is cool and damp, and the scent of wet earth and green leaves fills your lungs. You reach the terrace where you sat on the warm stone at the beginning of your journey, and you sit down again, and the stone is warm, and the view is the same, and yet everything has crested. You are not the same person who sat here before. You have traveled through centuries and dynasties, through tea, houses and gardens and workshops, and markets, and boats, and rivers, and deserts, and cities, and you have seen the art of tea from every angle, and you understand now what it means, not just as a historical phenomenon, but as a living practice, a way of being in the world that is as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. You close your eyes and listen, The birds are singing, and the water is trickling, and the mist is rising and falling, and the world is breathing. You breathe with it, and your breathing slows, and your body relaxes, and the tension that you have been carrying without knowing it begins to dissolve. The tea you drank earlier is still working in your body, the caffeine gentle and sustained, the warmth spreading through your limbs and your chest and your head, and you feel a sense of peace that is deep and complete and unshakable. You are here on this mountain in this moment, and there is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. The tea has brought you to this place, and the tea will stay with you long after you leave, a warmth in your chest and a stillness in your mind, and a connection to the world that is as old as the mountains, and as simple as a cup of hot water and a handful of leaves. The sun sets behind the ridge, and the light fades, and the mist rises to cover the terraces in a soft, white blanket. You sit on the warm stone and watch the mist, and the mist watches you, and the two of you breathe together, in and out, slow and steady, and the world grows quiet around you. The birds settle into their roosts, and the water trickles more softly, and the wind dies down, and the only sound is your breathing and the breathing of the mountain, and the two are the same, and you understand this in a way that does not require words or concepts or explanations. You simply understand, and the understanding is enough. You rise from the stone and begin the descent. The path is dark, but you know it by feel, your feet finding the familiar stones and the familiar curves, your body moving with a memory that is older than thought. You reach the bottom of the mountain, and the village is quiet, and the lights in the windows are warm and golden, and you feel a sense of homecoming that is not tied to any particular place, but to a particular feeling, the feeling of being where you are supposed to be, doing what you are supposed to be doing, at exactly the right moment. You find your room, and you lie down on the bed, and the blanket is warm, and the pillow is soft, and your body sinks into the mattress with a sigh of relief that you feel in every muscle and every joint. You close your eyes, and the images of your journey pass before you like a river of light. The tea picker on the mountain, the courtyard in Creston, the tea house in the city, the potter at his wheel, the kiln fire glowing through the night, the boat on the river, the garden with its pond and its pavilion, the poems recited in quiet voices, the ceramics glowing in the candlelight, the caravans moving through the desert, the ships sailing across the sea, the diplomats bowing over cups of tea, the laborers drinking from chipped bowls, the mothers brewing for their children, the old men sitting in the sun, all of them connected by a single thread, a single substance, a single act that is repeated billions of times every day across the surface of the earth, the act of lifting a cup to the lips and drinking and feeling the warmth spread through the body and knowing in some deep and unspoken way that this is what it means to be alive. The images slow. The river of light becomes a trickle, and the trickle becomes a drip, and the drip becomes a pause, and the pause pause becomes silence. Your breathing is slow and even, and your body is heavy and warm, and your mind is quiet and still. The taste of tea is still on your tongue, faint but persistent, a reminder of everything you have seen and felt and understood. The warmth is still in your chest, spreading outward, reaching into the tips of your fingers and the ends of your toes, and you feel yourself sinking deeper into the mattress, deeper into the blanket, deeper into the quiet and the darkness and the peace. The world outside your window is dark, and the stars are bright, and the wind is soft, and the night is long and full of rest. You are safe here. You are warm here. You are held here by the blanket and the bed, and the memory of the tea, and the mountain and the garden, and all the hands that picked and processed and brewed and served and drank and passed on the warmth from one generation to the next, from one century to the next, from one world to the next. You are part of that chain now, and the chain is unbroken, and it will continue long after you are gone, carrying the warmth forward into a future that you will not see, but that you have helped to shape simply by being present, by paying attention, by lifting a cup to your lips and drinking and feeling the warmth and knowing that it is enough. Your eyes are heavy now, and they close without effort, and the darkness behind them is soft and welcoming, like the mist on the mountain, like the surface of the pond in the garden, like the water in the river carrying the tea downstream. You drift into it, and it carries you, and you do not resist, because there is nothing to resist, nothing to hold on to, nothing to worry about. The tea has done its work, and the work is complete, and all that remains is to let go, to sink, to rest, to dream. The rhythm of your breathing slows. The warmth in your chest deepens. The sounds of the night grow softer and more distant. The images in your mind dissolve into color, and then into light, and then into nothing. You are floating now, weightless and free, carried by a current that is gentle and steady, and knows exactly where it is going. The current is the river of time, and it is carrying you through centuries and dynasties and mountains and cities and gardens and tea houses and boats and kilns and markets and streets and rooms and beds and dreams. And you are not afraid, because you know that the current will bring you back to where you need to be, that the warmth will stay with you, that the connection will remain unbroken. You breathe in, you breathe out. The space between breaths grows longer, and the breaths themselves grow softer, and the darkness behind your eyes grows deeper and more complete. You are sinking into sleep, into the kind of sleep that comes after a long journey, after a day of movement and observation and connection, after a night of warmth and stillness and peace. You are sinking into it slowly and completely, and there is no hurry, no urgency, no need to hold on to anything. The tea has given you everything you need, and now it is time to rest. Your body is heavy. Your mind is quiet. The world is soft at the edges, and the edges are dissolving, and you are dissolving with them, becoming part of the darkness and the warmth and the silence and the peace. The mountain is beneath you, and the garden is around you, and the river is carrying you, and the tea is within you. And all of these things are the same thing. And you understand this in the way that you understand things in the space between waking and sleeping, where the boundaries between self and world dissolve, and everything is connected, and everything is one, and everything is enough. You let go, you sink, you rest. The warmth spreads through your body one last time, a final wave of comfort and connection and peace, and then it settles, and you settle with it deep into the mattress, deep into the blanket, deep into the quiet and the darkness and the dream. The night is long, the rest is deep, the tea is warm, and you are safe, and you are held, and you are home. The sounds of the world fade to silence. The light fades to darkness. The warmth fades to peace. And in the silence and the darkness and the peace, you find what you have been looking for all along, not in the tea or the mountain or the garden or the city, but in the space between them all, the space where attention meets presence and presence, meets peace and peace, meets the quiet, steady rhythm of a body at rest. You are resting now, deeply, completely, without effort or intention or thought. The journey is over, and the warmth remains, and the warmth is enough. Good night, sweet dreams.